So recurve limb alignment is a key part of setting up your bow, but it can be really made super complicated and it can feel like you're going around in circles with this. So I want to show you how to get this and understand it properly so you can do it quickly and get consistent results with it and just get your limb alignment done, so then you can focus on the rest of your tuning. So let's roll the intro and then get to the video. So let's start with what you want by aligning your limbs. So the basic premise of this is that you want your limbs to be aligned with your riser so that you can look down through the string, and when you look through the string, it lines up down the center of your riser through the top limb, the riser, and the bottom limb. So this means that all three parts of the bow are in alignment, and then that means when you then draw and the bow and then it releases and goes forward, then when you do this, when you draw and release, the string is coming back in a straight line, and then when the arrow is released, there's less variance in the string position and less string movement left to right. And this makes a more stable shot and more consistent grouping and a more forgiving setup. Also makes it easier to tune, crucially. It's less likely that you'll have some weird tuning things going on. So that's the basic idea of limb alignment, and that's what you want. So before we get started, there's one key thing I want to mention, and that is when you do limb alignment, don't do it with the bow strung. I know manufacturers say that you can do it with the bow strung, and you can do it. It's not gonna, explode or anything, but do it with the bow unstrung. It's so much easier and it stops you going round in circles. What can happen when you do it strung is that the movement you'll do the movement, the bow is strung, and because there's tension, maybe the movement doesn't actually move the dowel correctly enough at first. So you'll do it and it doesn't quite move, you'll lock it down and think, okay, that didn't move. Then you'll do it a bit more, didn't move, do it a bit more, and finally you'll get it into the position, you'll lock it down, and then you'll shoot it, and when you shoot it, the movement sets the bolt in the position that it should be, because you've then allowed it to kind of reset, and it will jolt one way, and you'll check your alignment again, and it's moved back off the other way. And then you'll end up going around in circles because you try and move it and then it goes too far, and then you move it and it doesn't go enough. So save yourself the hassle and just de-string your bow. It doesn't take long. De-string your bow and then do the limb alignment. Regardless of which manufacturer it is, regardless of which system, it's much better. So just do that and it will save yourself a ton of hassle, trust me. It might sound like it takes longer, but actually it speeds it up because you stop going around in circles and wasting hours and hours doing it. So don't do it with a strung, unstring your bow first. So in terms of what you want from the limb alignment, as you can see in this picture here, what you want is the string running down the center of the limbs, as you can see in the picture. You also want to see slightly visible the inside face of the riser, as you can see in this picture, is slightly visible here, and also the long rod is down the middle of the bow. So these are the key things here that you're looking for when you look at your limb alignment. Also, when you draw back the bow, if you use, maybe a TW brace or some other brace that you can draw back your bow and hold it there and check the alignment, you want to be able to draw back your bow and have the alignment good at every point of you drawing back the bow. So this means that when you're drawing the limbs, as you bend the limb is bending in a straight line. So that means when you release, it will recoil and hit and propel the arrow in a straight line as well. So this is why you want to check that. This is not essential. It's nice to have if you have one, but you can get a great setup for 99% of people. Just do the setup as normal without the brace and you'll be fine. Now, some side notes. Don't do this by lining up the bolts in the holes. So obviously you can use something like a biter block on the limb. That gives you the line, as you can see in this picture again, like I showed before. You can see these plastic blocks on the limb here. These help you line up the limb with the string. These are great, but it's also recommended to check the alignment without the blocks by eye, because if the lacquer of the limb is slightly thicker on one side, it can make the blocks go off. If one of the blocks has been bent in your bag or something, or it's been squashed, it can be slightly misformed. So always use more than just 2 blocks, and always check it without the blocks as well. When you check it without the blocks, you're looking for the string in the middle of the bow, the limbs as normal, and then the string in the middle of the riser. But when you look at the riser, don't look at the bolt, look at the hole, because the bolt can be off to an angle just because of, how it's screwed down when you tighten it a bit too much or something. So look at the whole of the riser and then look down the riser and just check visually by eye as well. So you're checking with the blocks and without the blocks, and you're not using the hole. It goes without saying, when you do the limb alignment, put your bow on a chair and rest it or something. You don't want any of the limbs to touch anything. I've seen people put the bow on the floor, rest it on the bottom limb, lean it against, a building or something, or like a wall, and then try and do the limb alignment, which is just ridiculous, really. it's just pointless. So don't lean it against like that. You always need to have the limbs free from touching anything, so they're not being bent any way at all, and then you can check it properly. Now, here's the actual process of how to really understand the limb alignment and finally understand which way you need to move your limb. Look at this picture here of bad limb alignment. You can see here in this picture, the limbs are not lined up. So the question is now, which way do we need to move the limbs to fix this and get it into good alignment? So the key premise here, when it comes to limb alignment, is you want to align both limbs and then check the long rod, and then you move the limbs the opposite way to the long rod. So if you line both limbs up and the long rod is pointed to the left, that means that you need to move both limbs to the right. And this is as you're looking into the bow this way. So if you're looking in this way and the long rod is to the left, you move both these limbs to the right. This doesn't matter which manufacturer it is. You don't have to think about which system you're using. All you think about is which way you want to move the limb. So you want to move the limb to the right. So that's super simple. So if both limbs are aligned, long rod's to the left, you move the limb to the right. If the long rod is to the right, you move the limbs to the left. It's simple. Now, what do you do if you can't line up both limbs as was shown in that picture? Again, if you look at this picture, what you want to do is line up with the limb that gives closest to the long rod. So in this picture, you can see the top limb. When you line with the top limb, that is closest to being aligned with the long rod. So that's your top limb. Then you go to the bottom limb and line the string up. And as you can see here, if you lined the string up with the bottom limb, the long rod would be far to the right. So that means you need to move the bottom limb to the left. Super simple, exactly the same thing. You move the limb in the opposite direction to the long rod. So you do that, and then you check again, and just repeat. Find the limb that's closest to the long rod, move the other one, and then eventually after trial and error, you'll get to the point where they're in line. And it's super simple and really easy to do. It's give it a go. And make sure obviously you de-string your limbs in between doing the movement, but it's so simple, so easy to do, and it will get your limb alignment in no time compared to faffing around and moving around loads of the time and not knowing which way you're going. So it's really easy to use. Now, here is a picture of the correct limb alignment after making the adjustments. And you can see in this picture, the limbs go through the blocks nicely, through the riser, through the long rod. And what you'll start to learn over time is the amount of movement it takes. So in this example, it took between 1/8 and 1/4 of a turn to move the bottom limb in order to get the alignment in a good place. So you'll start to learn over time exactly how much you need to move each limb to get the alignment and to get it in a good place. But this is something that just develops. So this is, a basic overview of how to do the limb alignment. I'm sure you'll agree it's so simple when you follow it step by step and logically, and make sure that you're doing it properly by de-stringing your bow, doing all those kind of things. So do that and you'll be sure to get your limb alignment good. Finally, make sure to check without the limb gauges, like I said. Then shoot the bow a couple of times, a couple of arrows at blank boss to make sure the limbs are really settled in. Check it again, should be fine, but check it again. And then finally, put the screws, if it's a win and win here, put the screws back in. And when you put these screws back in, make sure you put these are the final placement screws, put them back in and get an Allen key, one on each side at the same time. And as you do this, make sure you tighten them the same time, the same amount in opposite directions, rather than just tightening one side. Do them both equally, and that way you're putting equal pressure on both sides of the limb. Now, one final tip is if for some reason you do find yourself going round and round in circles, the best thing to do is to de-string your bow and look. So I can do that now. You can de-string your bow and look in the limb alignment block here, you can look in here and by eye reset the block to the middle position. So you can see, if you were to do that, you can look in the block here and you can reset this to the middle position. So you can see the gap on this side and this side of the block, and you can just reset that to the middle position for both the top and the bottom limb, and then start fresh. Because the worst thing is just going around in circles, getting confused, not knowing what to do. And sometimes the best thing is to just start from fresh, reset it to the middle, and then you're done. What you can also do is with that block, once you've got it, you can make a mark on the block and a mark on the riser to make sure that you've marked where it is, and in case it moves or in case it gets loose at some point, then you can just reset it to that mark by lining up the lines you've drawn. So that's just another little tip you can do. But that has been a complete overview of the limb alignment. I'm sure you'll agree it's super simple when you do it. Follow a logical step-by-step process. I hope you've enjoyed that video. As always, be sure to smash that like button, especially if this helped you save a ton of time with your limb alignment. And also you can follow us on social media, and I'll put the links to that below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.